You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ask Drone U. Today we're going to be talking about commenting, or how to comment on the FAA's new Part 108, which is 731 pages. And no, I did not print it out. This is a blank ream of paper. Who would waste that much paper, Rob? That's an awful lot of paper to waste. And for all the other videos out there, it's 731 pages in case you didn't know that. So it is also available on the FAA's website, faa.gov/newsroom/BVLOS _NPRM_website_version.pdf if you want to download it. We'll make that available below.
Yes, we will.
But we're going to be talking really more so about how much does this actually matter? Who is going to be actually doing this? Does this make the world of flying drones more complicated or more simplified? Rob, you know there are actually a lot of videos out there regarding what is Part 108, right?
Yeah, in fact, I think there's some really good videos out there from some of our compatriots, colleagues, whatever you want to call them. I think we've seen some good. Yes, we've spent a little bit of time watching some of those videos, and it's been great. I've actually learned a lot. But I think what we want to do is kind of take a different perspective. Certainly 100%. Focus on comments very specifically and what some of those comments might be. We're going to do it, I guess, a little bit more informally by just kind of talking about it, right?
Yes, because
we know there's some people putting out some formal stuff, which is great.
Because comments should never be cut, copy, and paste ever. If you literally have 100 of the exact same thing, they count it as one comment. We learned that when we had over 1,200 comments on the night flight NPRM. I mean, we've been in this song and dance longer than almost everyone else. So
I have a question
except for
you.
Drone Camps, he's been in a year longer than us. What? Yeah.
Oh, drone. Yeah, good job, Drone Camps.
Justin.
Justin. Anyways, why has it taken us a little bit longer to get something like this out? I mean, you did the news show and you kind of addressed it, and so, but why is it taking us a little bit longer?
Well, because honestly, if you think about it, Part 108 is larger than Part 107. I mean, it's a 731 page document, which essentially tries to allow for beyond visual line of sight, pretty much under two categories, permitted and certificated operations. But there's so many complexities to this particular proposed regulation that we really wanted to get more feedback from other people, to hear what the different factions of the community are saying. And you definitely have a wide array of opinions out there. It's actually really interesting. You know, there were a couple of videos that, Joshua Bardwell put out a video about pretty much saying this is a complete disaster.
At least for recreational pilots, but even beyond that.
Yeah, sure. I just think it was in a macro sense. But, one of the things that I will say that is extremely disappointing about beyond visual line of sight, because ultimately this is great as a macro, right? When we have drone delivery, we are now going to actually start competing with China. China is years ahead of us. And the ability to have beyond visual line of sight operations is going to make mapping easier. You're going to be able to capture way more data. You're going to be able to fly much further. Drone delivery is going to increase the convenience and speed of commerce, which technically would fall under the advancement of the Industrial Revolution. Because anytime that we have faster transportation and more convenient access to purchase, that is typically what drives the advancement of the Industrial Revolution. So this could have a very large and significant impact on our ability to buy goods, enjoy things, and speed up the economy as a whole. I think I do wonder, though, if this is something that society wants, just because of what happened in Texas. with how at Texas A&M, they launched drone delivery and they quickly canceled all of it because people were complaining about how loud it was. So long story short is beyond visual line of sight can have a massive impact on us. My disappointment in all of this is that once again, the FAA showcases a complete lack of experience in flying. What I mean by that is that there's no performance-based standards for mitigating emergencies. In fact, one of the things on here is that the whole Part 108 is not going to allow for pilot in the loop scenarios, meaning the FAA specifically said that it's going to be a simplified user interface, meaning that pilots can only adjust altitude, adjust velocity, but they can't actually have any sort of quote unquote controls. So there's not going to be any tornado motion to avoid a massive failure. It's essentially saying, or the FAA is essentially saying, we don't care if these things come down, it's just where they come down, right?
Yeah. Would you say to that point that most, and probably some large percentage of these are going to be fixed wing, they're going to be VTOL? So maybe it's less of a factor, what you're describing specifically?
I think you bring up a point that we haven't talked about in regards to doing this show, which is that the fixed wings are going to have a glide path. So the crashes on a fixed wing, if coded right, could be much less severe than a quadcopter. Like a quadcopter loses propulsion and it's the death roll and you're done. There's no stopping it whatsoever.
Yeah.
You can have emergency procedures for flyaways. You can have emergency procedures for, battery loss, motor overspin, all of those things. But again, this document doesn't actually address that at all. So because of, everything that's been going on in the industry with all these different voices, we wanted to aggregate some of the feelings, some of the vibes, and then we use Kathy.
I like the emphasis. Vibes.
Yeah. And then we use Kathy to vibe code us some comments to write for the NPRM.
I think if you've been watching anybody else talk about this, you're seeing kind of a common theme, and that is that for the most part, this really is for the larger. I don't think it's necessarily intended this way. Maybe it is, but for the larger organizations, the larger companies, and giving them the framework to take this idea, this concept of BVLOS related operations and scale it.
And I think it's important to define larger, right? Because if you're not doing 50 million a year in revenue, then you're smaller. So
that is the Paul threshold. Yeah. Just to be clear. That is not codified anywhere.
No, it's not.
Except in the transcript of this show.
Yeah. But I think it is important to mention, because if you are a small operator, mid-size operator, golf course, mom and pop shop that wants drone delivery, all of those things. No, seriously.
No, I'm laughing because I can just see who's going to be the one at the golf course trying to run this operation. First of all, who's going to be the operations manager or whatever? You're going to find some 12-year-old, 18-year-old kid who's working at the golf course. And I'm being facetious, of course. But then at the end of his day, he's going to go in and he's going to do all the reporting that's required from this. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
There's not going to be anybody at the golf course who would love to take advantage of this that's going to do all this crap.
Yeah. If anything, the golf course girls just definitely got a sick.
Well,
they ain't going anywhere.
Last time we played, because we don't play golf that once a year, it seems like now, but the golf girl took a shot with us.
She did.
So that's what it's going to take. Mm-hmm. She's going to have to have a few shots.
Buy your golf girl a shot
before she can handle this crap.
I don't think she wants to handle this crap. She's going to make way more tips by just driving around.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, let's talk about Part 108, beyond visual line of sight operations. And let's break this down, because if you are a smaller operator, a medium-sized business, and that's the other thing too, Rob, is that all these medium-sized businesses that could benefit from drone delivery probably have no idea about this. They probably have no idea that right now is the innate time to comment on this, to drive the future. I am so sick of boomers and doomers, and doomers are just a subset of boomers, that are driving the future of aviation and yet have very little to no experience. So it crushes me, but let's talk about some things here. Just for a quick little recap, Beyond Visual Line of Sight Operations is currently in NPRM, so that is a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. This would essentially break operations of BVLOS down into two categories: permitted operations, which includes package delivery, agricultural, aerial surveying, civic interest, operations training, demonstrations, flight tests, and recreational permits. Yes, believe it or not, recreational permits, although you would need standard remote ID to do BVLOS, and most home builts and whatnot can't do that unless you have a DJI Air unit or something else.
But effectively, it's too expensive for the average person, the average company to go through that process.
Who knows? Maybe Jordi Munoz over at 3DR is going to launch something to compete with that. I sure hope you do. I'll support you. But then there's certificated operations where are much more serious. You can get drones up to 1,320 pounds. Package delivery drones are below 110 pounds. And certificates are required to operate in category 4 and 5 areas. These areas are notated by population density. You can see that on the government's land scan. This is my biggest thing. Like when we're about to talk about, comments and things to consider for commenting, I think the biggest thing is that in most of the areas that drone delivery could actually occur is covered under section 4 and 5 or category 4 and 5, which means you have to apply for a certificate. It's going to be very similar to the waiver system that already exists right now. Super cumbersome. And unless you're doing 50 million or more in revenue annually, I doubt you have the $1 million annual budget for reporting compliance that's noted in this document, that what they expect for people to see. I actually I think I copied and pasted that in here.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. But anyway, look, my notes on this are 20 pages long. Like, I mean, this is ridiculous. And to let's go back and take it one step at a time. Rob, you've been asking some really important questions about who is this really going to impact? Who do you really think this is going to impact?
Well, I mean, it seems like it was kind of what I opened with, and that it's primarily going to impact the ability for the larger organizations and companies, and we're using Paul's number of 50 million, give or take, and it's going to help them have the infrastructure in place. And yes, there's a lot of problems that still need to be worked out, hence comments. This is not the final rule, obviously, so we need to do that. But I just wonder if it's a little bit of, it's in our face. Everybody, it came out, and so there's a lot of frenzy, and there's videos about it. But I really wonder if in 6 months, we're all just going to be back to normal. Of course, in 6 months, this is going to be sort of in the process of actually being written into the final rule, right? So we're going to kind of be in that no man's land. But it seems like even in the document, I think it references, forgive me if I'm getting the context not quite right, we expect there to be about 200 organizations that this will impact. Like, it says that in there. Mm-hmm. And so I just wonder because one of my questions is, well, if you're not going to fly under Part 108, then you can just, if you're not going to be doing BVLOS, in most cases, you just fly under 107. I don't really understand the complexity as far as that's concerned, and maybe it's just because I'm a layman in many respects.
Well, I think actually something that is important to mention is that there are now 5 different ways to operate drones.
And growing.
Yes. I have to check myself, man, because
there will be 5 when 108 is final.
Yeah. I have to check myself because I get really passionate about this stuff, because it's really clear that lobbying has come in here and really tried to segregate this. And I think it's really important that we allow all sorts of companies to acquire permits in all sorts of population densities, assuming they have the right safety protocols in place to allow for innovation. Whether you're, a airline pilot, whether you're a helicopter pilot, whether you're a drone pilot, whether you're a surveyor, whether you're Special Agent Bald over here. I'm just kidding. That's just his nickname. It's not actually factually true in any sense of the way. But
that I'm special agent, you mean?
Correct. Yeah. What matters, though, is that we all started in the same place, which was a love of flight, which is recreational flight, hobby flights. So when we complicate now that there are 5 different ways to take flight under the FAA, I think that this is only going to create more confusion, especially for small to mid-sized businesses. Now, some people could say, oh, but Paul, that's good for you because you can help them navigate the way. I think the FAA is proving what I learned at the University of New Mexico, which is called American political theory, which is that we never, ever, ever, in fact, this is why something I applaud that Trump is doing, of just completely negating departments. We never in American politics take a system, delete it, and rebuild it, and just factor in for the new things that we want to do. We're always adding, deleting, adding, adjusting. It's never like, it's imagine if you make a sandwich and it's a triple decker and you realize that the tomato has gone rotten and moldy. And even though the rot and the mold has gone to the lettuce and the onion, you only replace the tomato. So,
or you just add another layer of fresh tomato, but you don't get rid of the old layer of moldy crap.
So over time, the mold is going to spread to all the other areas. And that is American political theory in a nutshell, is that we never actually reset a system. We always just constantly make all these adjustments.
Look at the tax code.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I think that's also important to note because some people are scratching their heads on Twitter, on X, formerly Twitter. There have been a lot of comments of, I thought you needed a Part 107 to operate under Part 108.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
In fact, yeah, people without a Part 107 can just go, I guess, work for an organization. And it does. This is a question I had: is can a single, and I think theoretically the answer is yes, but I don't know. Could a single operator who has his own little LLC operate without a Part 107 because he's operating under Part 108?
Well, see, that's actually a really good...
Because you can do VLOS flights.
That's a very good point because honestly, this is where things get confusing and a great opportunity to comment. It's pretty much stated that Part 107 is for anyone who's doing commercial flights, right? I mean, that is one of the backbone. It used to be you're flying for fun or for hobby or the furtherance of a business. I can't stand that term, and it's been used forever. And then there were people that were saying, well, we can't say furtherance of a business anymore. It's like, well, I can say whatever the hell I want. We live in America. But but you're making money. Like,
you say tomato.
Exactly.
I say tomato.
But under Part 108, they've taken package delivery out of 107 and made this whole new thing of 108. But they do say that you can operate under 108 without a 107.
And just do it specifically says VLOS flights.
Yeah.
So you don't need a 107 anymore as long as you're following the 108 criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're, we talk about how it's going to be very expensive, et cetera, which as this all gets implemented and all the requirements, and we don't even know what 146 is ultimately going to look like and who's going to fulfill that yet and all these different things. But really, if you're a small person, if you're a one-man show, for example, and you want to operate under 108, you don't have your Part 107, I don't know, you could, and you've got a couple of drones, right? You could manage the requirements in terms of reporting and so forth.
Yeah.
You could sort of simplify that for yourself. Systematize that for yourself, and then are you able to operate without a 107 because you're operating under 108?
I think that's a very good. I think that needs to be clarified, because
or maybe it's better if it doesn't get clarified, so you can just do it.
Well,
I don't know.
No. Let's hold on. I think this actually brings up a very important point, and I'm really curious what other people think. Because we have gone from one end of the spectrum, meaning hyper-conservative rules, to hyper-liberal rules. And you could argue, I mean, think about this. You're mapping a large area.
Explain why you're saying that, though.
I'm saying that because Part 107 was extremely conservative, very limiting. And honestly, the FAA has proven that many of the people who were not following those rules were vindicated and validated. And the perfect example is the lack of notation for flight over people or flight over moving vehicles in Part 108. Not even mentioned. So they don't care. And no one should care. Like if you're flying over a large group of people that are stationary, sure, that poses a different safety risk and a different safety situation. But flying over people that are walking on the sidewalk as you're doing a map of a parking lot, who cares? The chances of something bad happening are literally less than 1/1000%. So, and also conservative versus, more liberal take on rules. Canada realized their rules were extremely conservative and then changed them to have the micro drone rule, meaning that if your drone was below 250 grams, you couldn't fly near airports, but outside of that, you didn't need a license. You didn't need all this stuff. It was actually to see the Canadian government do that and Transport Canada do that, I think is actually a very logical progression and a very rational ideological stance on rules as a whole, because over-regulation causes just as many problems as under-regulation. I think policymakers could argue that. And, back to your point that we got here is, if I'm flying under Part 107 and I'm doing a mapping mission,
Right.
and now my mapping mission is going to go 4,000 feet out, which again, visual line of sight has never been defined, right? What is actually visual line of sight? So that whole gray area now, you could say, oh, well, I need to map this runway and it's 8,000 feet. Am I really going to go file a permit for beyond visual line of sight when I can just get the job done really quick?
As a 107 pilot. Under a 107.
Because there's no
flight.
reporting under 107. So you could say, well, I'm flying under 107 and you didn't define visual line of sight. And because of that, yeah, I can still see it. It might be one speck, policymakers have argued that no, you must be able to seek and avoid. And there are, really good reasons for that, but it's a very gray line. And honestly, this gray line, wavers us between controlled safety and uncontrolled chaos. And it's important to understand because, for a long time, we've complained about remote ID and how it doesn't actually solve the problem. I think with 108, we're going to see a new remote ID. We're going to see network ID, and that's actually going to solve the problem of remote ID, meaning airplanes, helicopters, everyone is going to be able to see drones, and it's not going to be this bifurcated system anymore. So Part 108 is actually, while it may only impact utilities, construction companies, engineering firms, public works, law enforcement, public safety, the overall or overarching implication, I think, is actually much larger. Yeah. Because this is going to impact the next remote ID, which Congress did say you have to produce, right? So I think that this is absolutely going to change the way that the regulatory environment as a whole. And I think it's absolutely crucial for everyone to go out there and comment. So if you don't know where to go to comment, it's federalregister.gov. We're going to provide the link here. You essentially top right corner of the page, click submit a public comment. There's a couple of things here. Number one, look, as humans, we're emotional, but you can't be emotional in these comments. You have to speak the DC language, which means you read this document, you take some of the points from us of like, hey, I really believe population densities should not separate certificated operations and permit operations, because then we're going to close the loop of innovation. We can't let little guys actually practice beyond visual line of sight and open up new ways to advance our economy. You've got to source that, right? Okay, under the point where it says population densities, blah, 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 we believe that the FAA is limiting operations that are permitted under Part 108 too much that would economically hinder smaller businesses below $50 million, et cetera. You have to be very, very strategic. If you get emotional, if you call the FAA dumb or any of these things, you might as well not have wrote a comment to begin with, because they're just going to be ignored. So make sure that you source your points, make sure that you write your points succinctly, use ChatGPT, but be very specific in your prompt. Like, don't just, write crap. So,
well, and personalize it as best you can. This is something that you're seeing everybody say, and it's for a good reason. And that is, if you're going to comment, which we hope you will, and we will give you, I guess we'll probably do a document just to give people some ideas of what some of the things are we see that are potentially problematic. But the more you can personalize it to your own experience, the better. And I think that goes without saying, but we're saying it anyways.
100%.
In your mind, what are the biggest concerns for your average Part 107 pilot? Or are there any?
I think a lot. It's actually been really interesting, even as I asked people on LinkedIn yesterday, what are your real thoughts about this for the little guys or for the medium guys, right? For the veterans. One guy mentioned that it's completely unattainable, that the way that the law is written, it's completely unattainable.
So does that discount what I said earlier about you could be a one-man show instead of simplify and you systematize and figure it out and be okay?
I think that absolutely is defying what you said. Yeah.
Okay, so he's
that's what
disagreeing
you
with that
asked.
point.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, which is totally fair. Yeah, that's what we want. Yeah.
Well, and I've seen a lot of people on Reddit say the same thing, that
Sure.
this is just like so far beyond what they would do. And it's important to note too that beyond visual line of sight operations are meant to be fully autonomous. They are not meant to be pilot in the loop systems. They are not meant to be controlled by pilots. Why I struggle with that. I really struggle with that. You know, Airbus has been automated for decades, right?
Sure.
But there's still a pilot up front.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always work. There are failure opportunities. And drones are the safest cohort of aviation enthusiasts in world history,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So I struggle. I really struggle. I think this unlocks a lot of operations for corporations. I think the FAA is also playing a very dangerous game here, because since the beginning of flight, the pilot has been ultimately responsible. Right?
Yeah.
And now it's the corporation is responsible, which I get it, because corporations oftentimes are going to force pilots to do things that are illegal. But that's where you have a backbone and say, look, according to federal law, I cannot do this. Like, I can't do this. And, if that's an issue for you, then make a decision. But just know that if any emergency happens and they find out you're not following FAA guidelines, the insurance is not going to cover it. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm kind of there's a lot. I'm curious who's going to be willing to be an operations supervisor, especially if you're going to be responsible for a lot of potential risk, I would think.
Well, and it's also not clear, because you mentioned there are, so for everyone who hasn't watched the news show, there are these new roles under Part 108. You're not the pilot. You're the operations, what is it? Operations
supervisor and flight coordinators.
So operations supervisor is not actually like flying the drones. They're just literally overseeing all these different operations.
Pre-flight planning, operations planning.
The flight coordinator is the one actually running the mission. But what's weird is in 108.330, they're limited to a 50-hour a week working time, and operational personnel are limited to a maximum of 14-hour duty day. So how is that calculated, right? Because let's say that I work for a utility and I have 10 sites that have drone in a boxes, and I have 10 flights per day that are an hour long. That's 100 hours of flying. Does that mean in one day I can no longer work anymore? Because if that's the case, I'm going to go get a utility job, Rob.
I'm guessing salaries aren't going to go down commensurately. It's true.
But I mean, like, some of these questions are very real and legitimate, of like, okay, how are we calculating hours here? Is it by flight hours? Because I don't think that that's relevant. Or is it by total hours worked? I think there's an opportunity for comment there. And that's going to matter for large corporate and government institutions that are going to be running flights all day long, you know? So
no, absolutely. It definitely affects them. We know that. That's why we're going to take it very seriously. And ultimately, I think our push in terms of what we're going to be doing here is helping those enterprise customers implement this, right? Mm-hmm. That's ultimately, because those are ultimately the ones that this is going to primarily matter for. That's what it seems like. Yeah.
And for those surveyors, mappers, agronomists, for the people that come to us for training anyway on the enterprise side, we are going to be offering Part 108 training. Training is mandatory because the certificate is not. Our name is out there for having the highest standards of flight training, and we're going to maintain that. But I think this does add confusion. I think it does push the little guy out. I think that the people who are going to benefit here are the Walmarts, the Amazons, the pipelines, the
very large utilities.
The Chevrons of the world,
Mm-hmm. I really wonder, why not, for a smaller Part 107 operator, keep the waiver process alive within the Part 107 system? Because this totally deletes it. It
does, which is a very important point. And it does say that specifically, that if you were seeking a waiver under 107, that it would have to fall under any of these new things that are coming out, which is really interesting. What else is interesting to that point is that Part 108 operations are not going to use LANCE. So that whole, the world's worst acronym for anything from the government, LANCE, the whole instant airspace authorization system.
Which actually worked kind of nicely now.
It does, but it's still the worst acronym.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, why would you create a whole new one just for Part 108
That's
operations?
a great question. And that's going to, as far as we understand, and there, again, been some people that have talked about it in detail and articulately, it could be years before this new system is in place.
Yeah.
When you're talking UTM, the Part 146 stuff, how does that interact with when this is actually going to be able to go live?
Well, and then now also you're changing fundamental rules of aviation as a whole just to allow for this. For example, the right-of-way conditions, which there were a lot of videos that skipped over that because I think that they have conflicts of interest in their business because they support manned and unmanned pilots. That's a very real problem. Okay, so what are we talking about? Right of way. Part 107 operators are going to have to yield to Part 108 operations, meaning we are across the street from a Walmart. We have a waiver to fly within, I don't know, it's like a nautical mile radius of this area without filing lands.
Visual line of sight flights.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, that being said, if I have to yield to a 108 operation, number one, how the hell am I going to know it's a 108 operation? Number two, how am I going to be able to see that information? Number three, how am I actually going to yield? I know that they have these new ADSP providers that are supposed to provide deconfliction information, and they're supposed to help out with, seeing everything that's in the airspace. But I find it very difficult to be able to yield to those operations without having a much more robust, connected experience as drone pilots. And then that's now the really interesting part. The government is outright defying itself. Okay. What am I talking about? Well, the whole DJI ban, we're 119 days from the DJI ban. That's December 23rd, 2025. If it's not shut down by BIS or if it's not shut down by the Section 232 investigation, which has 1 week to have its findings, right? We have notated, I've been reaching out to our congressmen and women. I've been reaching out to POTUS, et cetera, to try to change the outcome for this as much as possible. The biggest issue, the only way that DJI drones are sharing leaked data is over the internet. So what is the United States' response? Let's ban DJI and then connect every drone to the internet. Now have that shit make sense. I'm serious, man. Like, this is getting ridiculous. Is the tail wagging the dog or like what's going on here? So I bring that up because going back to yielding, I know I'm all over the place. I'm sorry. I'm passionate about this stuff, okay? Going back to yielding operations, now manned aircraft are going to have to yield to Part 108 operations.
Can you reference where that's putting you on the spot?
It is putting me on the spot. This is 700 pages. I did read that. Other people have talked about it too.
Okay.
Greg from Pilot Institute talked about it. If Greg said it, it's probably fairly true.
Probably true. That's true.
But it also provides, great video, Greg. Okay, cool. But I don't know why you printed out the 700 pages, but great video.
Well, he might have just done what you did.
I think he actually did.
I don't think it was actually
that's kind of why it was funny too. So I hope he finds it funny. Anyway, that being said, there are a lot of helicopters and planes that do not squawk their ADSB location information. Law enforcement, government, FBI, some airplanes that are older that just don't have ADSB. And so, I know we need to modernize our system somehow, but this whole yielding of operations to 108, I think might challenge the aviation industry in a way that would kick back significantly. Anyway, that is my point. Part 108 completely changes the way that every single pilot in the history of man has had to think about yielding right-of-way operations. It's almost like if you've been a boater on the coast your whole life and they added a new light for the channels that was purple.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah, I still just have lots of questions. What is the gray area between a permit and a certificate? I know there's some indication of what that's going to look like, but is it just going to be up to the whim of your application, or do you think it's going to be really clear which one you're applying for?
I think it's going to be really clear which one you're applying for. So now here's one of the things that we have produced that I haven't seen produced anywhere else, which breaks down the entire beyond visual line of sight operations by permitted operations and certificated operations. So under permitted operations, you have a couple of different categories, right? What is the operation type? The maximum weight upon takeoff of the drone, the maximum population density, the fleet size, and operational limits. Okay, so package delivery, 55 pounds. Permitted, category 3 and below. So this is out in rural areas. You cannot do any hazmat package delivery though. So what about all those blood deliveries that they're doing all over the world but not in the United States? Well, that would fall under hazmat, so you still can't do it. So our house...
I wonder if there'd be a special permit at some point for that. So now you're back into the permit and waiver situation.
This is a CF. I'm just going to say it. Agricultural permits up to 1,320 pounds, but you can only do it in category 1 areas. So most of Loveland, most of Fort Collins, LaPorte, Bellevue, all those agricultural heavy areas, Greeley, that's all Cat 3, 4, 5. No BVLOS permit over there. Okay.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Okay, so
you're talking about 300 acres at a time or something. Clearly not any population density in those areas.
Yeah, I think comment number 1 that all of you could change is that if we're going to offer these beyond visual line of sight operations, then permitted operations need to be able to happen pretty much anywhere except over a city center. And I mean over a city center like downtown Denver from Rhino to Midtown would be a Cat 5, and then everything else you could do BVLOS, right? So
not going to happen, but you can make that comment.
I think it should happen if we're actually going to advance the economy in any way. Honestly, I feel like America is being left behind in aviation. I know people say that we've led the way in aviation for decades. I think that's bullshit.
So you're using aviation quite broadly and generally there.
I am, because people have been tweeting that the FAA has led aviation globally for years and that we are the gold standard and all this. And I think that's true, but I also think in an overemphasis of safety, innovation fails. Look at Zipline, man.
Well, that's why what's his name, Mike Rowe, says safety third.
Yeah, and that's true.
But I don't know that applies when you're talking about airspace and aircraft. Oh, come on. You can roll your eyes at me, but really, why does the rest of the world look to the FAA to develop their own rules? I'm playing devil's advocate here a little bit.
Why does the rest of the world look to the FAA?
And the rules that we have for the airspace here in the United States, a lot of the rest of the world looks to mimic those rules for their airspace.
I think you would take the classic Chris Voss answer and say, follow the money, which would say, if you want to be a part of the... Let me finish.
Okay, so that's the
Hold on, no,
cynical
let me finish.
perspective.
Let me finish.
Oh my gosh. I think he's going to hit me. I'm going to go over here.
No. If you want to be a part of the global economy,
cabal,
then that means you've got to follow the FAA standard for airspace.
Sure.
It is that simple.
Okay.
In my eyes. Well, if you got a counter argument, bring it on.
I already gave it to you. No, you're counter arguing my argument. So up yours.
Your counter. Love you, man.
No, I think that I just don't want to I think that some credit has got to be given. And like has been said in other videos, you've got to at least have some appreciation for what the writers of this have had to do. It's a pain in the ass.
There are 3 people who wrote this. You can find them on LinkedIn. I don't give them empathy whatsoever.
You're just saying they failed.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you could have done a much better job of understanding operations as a whole to create a much more simplified rule. I mean, let's use Einstein's system. Keep it simple, stupid. I mean, if we had much more simpler operations, you wouldn't have these reporting standards that they say are going to cost $1 million a year. You wouldn't have this bifurcation of the operations as a whole, which significantly benefit much larger corporations and also drive a wedge between, lower pilots and higher pilots. Mm-hmm. You've got these workspace limitations that are kind of more OSHA things. They're not really... I don't think they're really under the purview of the FAA. I mean, the FAA is supposed to have the national airspace system safe. So I see that, but I think that you could actually have a much better beyond visual line of sight system if you had performance-based standards for mitigating crashes, mitigating mid-airs, mitigating, any potential hazard. These things are relatively safe. They are relatively safe.
Yes, they are. I mean, the more that you get them up in the air and the more that are out there flying BVLOS missions. And that's one of the things that I kind of wonder about as well. And maybe you know this, but is there a distinction between a BVLOS operation within, say, a mile versus 100 miles?
Wait, I'm sorry.
So
I was reading something. I didn't follow that.
A BVLOS mission in the way that it's run and operated, and maybe this falls under the more the permitted instead of the certificated. It's you're going out a mile, maybe a mile and a half, still a BVLOS, obviously much more simple than 100 miles.
Yeah.
Is there a distinction between those flights in terms of expectations, requirements, etc.? And maybe that's just the permitted versus certificated.
On a distance basis, but that could actually be a very good idea.
I would think so.
I mean, because you think about it, right? We just did the news show, and earlier this year, and a boomer flew his Mini 4 Pro into a firefighting airplane, and he flew, what was it, a couple miles out? That was a beyond visual line of sight flight.
An illegal one, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's super dangerous. So let's just let everyone who's never had a pilot certificate fly beyond visual line of sight. What do you say, Rob?
Well, but they've got to...
Yeah, sorry. But
they're going to have to follow the rules of 108. I will say this, though, back to what you were saying. I think we do need to address this very explicitly in this show, and that is the reporting requirements. I wonder who's behind those, because that is way over the top.
It not only is it over the top, but it also turns ADSPs, or this data service providers, into narcs, and it turns the pilots into narcs, meaning if there's a failure with the ADSP, the pilot is supposed to report it to the FAA.
Whatever.
Yeah, no, seriously.
No, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
And then if there's any deviation whatsoever from the flight plan, that has to be reported by the ADSP to the FAA. So imagine this, right? You're flying.
So who points the finger first?
This is creating such a toxic environment for drone pilots. Yeah.
Well, look at the ag section, and you're supposed to report the name and the address of the potential customer.
Yeah, that's a privacy
violation. Can you
violation.
imagine most farmers?
Yeah.
Like, they're good old boys. I don't think they're going to be going for that.
Yeah,
and if you do it without their permission...
You're working for John Smith.
Right. But if you do some of that reporting without their permission, I think you're going to have some really pissed off farmers.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's a little. Just keep doing your Part 107 flights.
I never thought I'd say this, but Part 107 seems really simple right now.
Yeah, no, and leave this stuff to the utilities of the world, and the Amazons of the world. I mean, that's kind of where it's going to end up, anyways. And you know how I felt. I think I've been pretty clear about how I feel about the drone delivery concept.
What? How do you feel about it? Tell
me.
I
don't think it's, in order for that to be ubiquitous, it just seems so unrealistic for many reasons, not the least of which, how many packages can you put on a drone? I did read something that put it in the context of drone delivery for the last mile.
Yeah.
That makes some sense to me.
That's what UPS was working on back in 2018.
Yeah. And where'd that go?
Good question. But those UPS trucks still have LiDAR mapping everything, but...
That's great. I mean, that's already been happening by they could probably pipe into someone else who's already done that.
Tesla.
Right. And others. But I don't know. The drone delivery part of it, I see it for, long range inspections, other sorts of flights similar to that. I will believe mass drone delivery when I see it.
I think Zipline has the most effective system that I've seen, where they have these towers that the drones connect to, and you've got like 10, 20 drones on a single tower, and then it's going out and doing the drone delivery and coming back to the tower. In China, I have a friend who was just in Shenzhen, and he's like, I want to order a Lucky coffee or Luckin coffee.
Justin Shenzhen? Is he Chinese?
No. He was just in the province of Shenzhen.
Oh, that's hilarious. My bad.
Anyway, This is actually really important. So he wanted to get a coffee, a Luckin coffee or whatever, which is like the Chinese Starbucks, right?
Okay.
He ordered it on an app like DoorDash.
Yep.
And he was in some square, and the drone came to a pre-designated, pre-constructed, think of it like a small shed, except that shed is rectangular, okay? Not like a square, it's like rectangular. And the drone landed on the top, and then the package was winched down to the bottom. This way no one could get hurt by the props or anything like that. And then you would scan your phone onto the screen, and it would open up the door, so that way no one could spit in your coffee. Rob, he's done that to me. I'm just kidding. He hasn't done that to me.
Absolutely not.
But they had this entire infrastructure for it.
Yeah.
And I think the USPS could actually significantly benefit.
Well, the first thing that came to
this.
mind is in our neighborhoods around here, in a lot of neighborhoods that you all live in, have the mailboxes with multiple boxes. Still don't see it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I don't see it. I hope someday I do, I guess. I don't care. I mean, it's not like you can't order something from Amazon and it's here in 30 minutes anyways.
Yeah. I'll be real. I'm one of those people that I don't understand how we still have mail. 70% of it is garbage. You throw it away. Like, I would just outlaw advertisements by mail, and you would like reduce their budget by like 80%. For president.
Okay.
You know what number 2 would be? HOA's gone. Metro districts gone. No builder. You have to pay for your own infrastructure.
And then the developers would say, development gone.
And I'd be like, okay.
No, you wouldn't. That's not feasible.
I would here. Other places.
Well, that's true. Yeah. That's true. Now that we're here, we could stop development.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Everybody's mantra.
Lisa says that she needs a native sticker because the dog and Grace are native.
Right on.
It's a Colorado joke if you don't get it. But anyway, back to beyond visual line of sight. When it comes to your comments, I think the biggest thing is that number 1, they need to expand permitted operations beyond the allowed population densities, because proposed density is too restrictive and kind of services the big guys. Okay, Cat 1 is within 1 square mile of any land scan cell with 10 or plus people. Category 2 is low density, so you don't need any C2 links relying on unlicensed 47 CFR parts 5 through 15 devices. Category 3 is moderate density. Think single family developments. This adds a strategic deconfliction requirement. If I were to comment, I would say permitted operations should be allowed to fly in up to category 4 population densities and make strategic deconfliction mandatory for all the drones. I think that way you simplify the system. Cat 1 through 3 is if you look at the land scan map, like for here in Loveland, you wouldn't be able to fly any part of Loveland, like even down to Carter Lake, where it's very, very rural. It still shows up as category 4. So,
but that last point that you made about strategic deconfliction, find and avoid essentially is another way of saying that. That's a very complex problem in terms of the communication that's going to be required and the technological systems that have to be implemented for that to be a thing on UAS, right?
Yes, which is how also Part 108 completely changes drone manufacturing. Right now, you've got to have all these manufacturing compliances and whatnot. So,
but all I'm saying is that makes a lot of sense. It's just the solution to actually bring forward to make that happen is complicated in a ways out from a hardware standpoint. Even. Yes. Software, maybe not as much. I don't know, but from
I think
a hardware standpoint,
that's where you see the network remote ID, because you solve that problem right there.
Which they're not even, I mean, I guess there's people working on it, but there's no proposals for it or anything at this point. It's just been mandated that it happen.
Correct. That's as far as I understand right now. That could be wrong, but as far as I understand. Now, that being said, DJI drones have had strategic deconfliction since 2019. Any enterprise drone that has ADS-B in is seeing planes, helicopters, all that, and it's warning you.
So you're saying all the enterprise DJI drones have ADS, what is it?
ADS-B in, yes. Not out. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think network remote ID would fix that issue. And then it makes you wonder, why are we taking this bifurcated approach? You know, if you've already shoved remote ID down our throats, which is not anonymous at all, and I think is a constitutional violation under the Fourth Amendment. But that being said, I would actually love to see that case go back to court, because I think now with more conservative administrations, it would be a very, 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 very different outcome for that case. So an entirely different outcome.
Yeah.
I also know a lot of people that I've gotten comments on LinkedIn that say they never got a Part 107. They just fly anyway because they're not going to comply with remote ID. They have been shot at. They've had issues. The government didn't do anything about it. And so they're like, well, if you're not going to do anything about that, I'm not going to comply with 107. Like,
that's an interesting correlation.
I agree.
Because 107 came out well before remote ID, so they were making that decision before remote ID. But anyways, whatever.
Yep.
Whatever.
Yeah.
People are going to do what they're going to do.
I agree. I think another comment is that, they stated that there needs to be training for operators and flight coordinators, but not a pilot certificate. I think my second comment would be that anyone who's operating under Part 108 should have a Part 107 certificate, because I just, again, we go back to the guy who hit the firefighting airplane, right? He was not 107 certified. And I think that was on purpose, because then the FAA could prove that he knew the rules and he knew what he should not be doing.
So maybe ignorance is bliss? Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point as well, because I wonder if certain organizations, call it a big utility somewhere, is still going to require pilots that are going to operate under their system, under their infrastructure, under their organization to have 107s.
Yeah.
Because if I were running an operation, I probably would still require it, just to make sure your pilots know what they need to know to be ready to fly. It's not backbreaking to go get your Part 107.
Well, and this brings up an important point. Do you remember what Ted used to say? Who really runs the aviation industry?
The insurance companies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what if insurance comes back and says, you know what, the FAA might say that you don't need a pilot certificate to fly these drones, but we don't agree with that.
But if you want coverage from us,
you have to get
Yeah,
Part
that's a good
107.
point. Yeah.
Which if I were an insurance company, I would absolutely do. You know why? Because you're going to reduce the issues. And these drones are like tenfold more expensive.
True.
So if I'm, what do they call it?
More damage when they do crash. And there will be crashes.
Yeah. What is it called? The risk assessment officer at an insurance company. Whoever's job that is, I would have a field day with this. I would have an absolute field day, because you could protect yourself on so many levels and not cover operations like this.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I'm guessing that they were not really even thinking of it from an insurance standpoint. It's pretty clear, it seems, that there's some big players that have influenced this.
Very clear.
And I don't know if insurance was one of them. Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I will say something that's interesting is with this new operator and flight coordinator, you are adding more people to an operation that's supposed to limit people. So it was kind of protectionist for employment, which I actually think that may be a good thing. But now all these drone programs in utilities are going to have to be on a hiring spree. So anyway, I will say the reporting requirements, I think, are also comment number 3. That like as Rob said, I'm not going to report my client's information. They do mention that if you fraudulently fill that out, that there can be repercussions. It's not really clear what those repercussions would be. I've worked for agricultural clients before. Rob is right. They are very, very, very staunchly conservative, and rightly so. And they don't want their information out there or their business operations. It could also be a competitive disadvantage if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that said, the reporting requirements need to come down. Oh gosh, where do we even go from here? And I apologize, Rob, because we had talked about a lot more kind of structured podcast here, but there's so much going on.
Honestly, and I hope you all agree with this. We just wanted to have a conversation about it. There are and maybe kind of go in some different directions from what's already out there. There's plenty of information out there already about people kind of getting into the weeds and summarizing things for you and kind of outlining things for you, and that's great. I would go listen to those, but just kind of wanted to bring up some different perspectives and points on this that people need to be thinking about.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens in the end. but definitely comment. And again, I think we're gonna prepare a document that'll be more specific as to what we see as some of the bigger issues that you should comment on.
100%. I just think that we definitely need to comment. You guys need to get your comments out there. This is also why, I've been saying for a long time that the industry kind of needs to come together and stop fighting each other with differing viewpoints. At first there were the hobbyist versus the commercial pilot. And there were groups that were advocating of like, well, we need to do commercial stuff. And, the commercial pilots are going to be so much more dangerous. That ended up being categorically false. And then it was, okay, well, we're commercial pilots and we need to support traditional drones and not FPV, even if they're commercial. And now, Cinewhoop FPV flights, as far as a commercial trajectory, has skyrocketed relative to traditional drone stuff. So that's been false as well. I mean, I think this industry suffers from division. I understand why. We all have very strong opinions. And I think that ultimately, I think all drone pilots would benefit if we kind of came together. We all submitted our comments. We all wrote things and didn't trash each other in them and just kind of move forward. So I really think that is crucial. Other comments to consider, these are just some of my notes, is that should the pilot still remain responsible instead of the company, or should there be some joint responsibility? Because again, they're trying to inhibit companies from taking too much risk because they're seeing that companies are the giant risk takers, meaning like large scale corporations just trying to get stuff done in the benefit of shareholders. I think, again, the restrictions on operations based off of population density, size, and weight could be much more simplified. Also, if you do apply for a permit, you can only apply for a permit under, I think it's one of 8 operations. Why not be able to have a permit where if I want to do aerial surveying and civic interest, why can't I do that under the same permit? I think there's a little bit too much bifurcation there. The hazardous goods section, I think, is really important. The deconfliction section, that if all drones had deconfliction, why can't they just fly over populated areas as well? I'll be honest, right before this came out, I was very excited about Part 108. We had just met with Airspace Link, who I think is going to be an ADSP. We've seen a lot of delivery operations going on across borders, which was really cool. And seeing what is possible has been a lot of fun and really cool. And this has kind of put a damper on it all because it really services the very large companies in this world. It does not service the people who have built this industry from the ground up. So Drone Life made a great article that came out very quickly. AUVSI and Commercial UAV News also had some articles where, Rob, here are some comments from Reddit, which I've been shadow banned from since I posted that DJI is actually stealing people's data. I am so torn. I have the utmost respect for safety and I endorse safe, responsible, ethical drone use. I fly that way as well. I would never wish to harm or harass anyone. I suspect many pilots feel the same way. But I've lost what little respect I have for the federal government. And I would comfortably bet a pile of cash that literally everyone here has gone BVLOS before, sometimes routinely, or probably routinely. Dude, come on. Have you looked at YouTube? Like, how far can I fly the EBX from one Hawaiian island to the other?
Sarcastic. Yeah. I'm being sarcastic.
Okay. The tech makes doing so very safe. I get that regulations often lag behind tech advances, but it feels like hobbyists are being boxed out from every direction. Another comment from Chuck Johnson said, "Thanks, Mr. B. This is an interesting other consideration for those who could or would want to do BVLOS. I have a commercial fixed-wing airplane license multi-engine endorsement, but because of my heart damage medical issue, I can no longer get a medical cert. So that means I'll never be able to pilot an airplane by myself, no matter how much money I get from winning the big jackpot lottery. I wonder if having an airplane commercial license, if I could sneak into BVLOS for low usages, simple BVLOS flights." You probably would.
But like what? What's he gonna do?
I don't know.
I don't either.
I don't know. Here's another one. One other person said, I kind of hate that we're abandoning the hobby prosumer side of drones in the U.S. Without DJI, Autel, and other leaders in the UAS space, we would be years behind R&D and manufacturing. Yeah, I mean, those are just some of the core comments that I've seen, just hitting LinkedIn really quick so you guys can see these other reactions because
They can go see them.
Yeah, no, it's just really interesting to see what's going on in this world, you know?
It is. That is very true. And the reaction to this, as expected, has been, I don't know, a little bit intense. People not liking it.
Yeah.
I mean, did we really expect anything different? I didn't.
Yeah, Jeremy Young said, I surely didn't believe what I just heard. No 107 to fly 108. What? Brian said part 108 is just unobtainable. And Brian realized that I haven't watched Star Trek in my life. I'm sorry, Brian. People are saying that rules abroad are better. Someone said, Paul, you nailed it once again. Well, you wanted to be trusted by the FAA. I will say a vast number of people who are licensed are safe and doing the right thing on the daily. My hope is for those new abilities to continue in the practice of safety first. Davis says, I've been taking my time going through the proposed rules. My first thought is there should be someone in each organization that is certified for 108. In addition, I'm curious about how 146 will be fleshed out to allow for companies to be certified as authorized support providers.
A lot to be determined there.
Well, I would like to have Michael Helander on the show.
That'd be amazing.
To talk about this because I think it's really important to get everyone's opinions. And I think Airspace Link is on the leading edge of the ADSPs and UTMs. So I would love to hear their thoughts. But let us know what you think. We would literally need to have an 8-hour long show. I thought about doing an audio recording of 108 and posting it on Audible and selling it for like $10 a download. You can listen to part 108. Here we go. Welcome to the Federal Register. No, that would be boring as hell. But
if your wife snores and you can't sleep at night, buy this.
Mm-hmm. Don't they all? Anyway, hopefully Lisa didn't hear that. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. If you have proposed comments, throw them in the comments below. Share for the world because when you share and collaborate, we all win. That's going to do it for us today here at Ask Drone U.